Do you want to maximize your success with NCUA? Join Mark Treichel as he shares with you the insider's view on passing your exam with flying colors. The With Flying Colors podcast is sponsored by Credit Union Exam Solutions by Mark Treichel. If you would like to work directly with the Credit Union Exam Solutions team and receive support to optimize your results with NCUA so you save time and money, visit us at marktreichel.com to find out more.
Hey, Mark Treichel here with a quick take with Flying Colors episode on a board action that came out in February that I wanted to highlight. So, is NCUA considering a large credit union program for the regional offices? Why, yes, indeed they are. Specifically, Todd Harper in February stated that in the longer term, we should, in my view, consider the development of a regional large credit union program for larger credit unions. How did this come about? Well, so in February, the NCUA board voted on changing the threshold of credit unions that are assigned to the Office of National Exam and Supervision, or WUNS, the WUNS office, proposed changing the threshold from 10 billion to 15 billion. Now, as a reminder, in 2012, the NCUA established a new office, the Office of National Exams and Supervisions, or WUNS, and reorganized its central office and field structure. As part of its internal restructuring, the NCUA transferred the responsibility for supervising covered credit unions to the Office of National Exams and Supervisions from the regional offices. Initially, the covered credit unions were transferred to WUNS, or Office of National Exam and Supervision, on January 1, 2014, and they did it annually thereafter once the credit union hit $10 billion in assets as of March 31. So if you hit it in March 31, the following year, you would get transferred to the Office of National Exam and Supervision. Now, with the extensive growth that came in the pandemic, NCUA paused that. And so credit unions during the pandemic that would have normally gone to the Office of National Exam and Supervision were still supervised by the regional offices. And so at the last budget meeting in November or December, when NCUA approved their budget for the year that we're in right now, 2022, they kept those $10 to $15 billion credit unions in the regional offices. So that in February, they proposed a rule that would change the threshold from 10 billion to 15 billion. And the reality is those credit unions back in 2014, when I was at NCUA, we considered credit unions that were going into the Office of National Exams and Supervisions as too big to fail. Not too big to fail as it relates to the economy of the United States of America, too big to fail as it relates to the insurance fund, the NCUSIF, the National Credit Union Share Insurance Fund. So that insurance fund has grown over time. Credit unions have grown over time, and there has been no recalibration changing that $10 billion threshold to a higher number. So the NCUA has proposed that there would be a new threshold of $15 billion. My anticipation is that this rule will be finalized some point in time in 2022, and most likely as it's linked to the budget, which will be proposed in probably December of this year. And I think that's a good choice. Credit unions have grown, the insurance fund has grown, so the materiality of a $10 billion credit union is not the same as it was in 2014. That's a good thing. But buried in all this is that, again, Harper said that in the longer term, we should, in my view, consider the development of a regional large credit union program for larger credit union. Todd also made some statements about the fact that there can be resource sharing between the Office of National Exams and Supervisions and the regions. That's a great theory. It's harder to put in place than one might imagine. WUNS, the Office of National Exam and Supervision, has very limited resources. One of the reasons they didn't want to keep the threshold at 10 billion is they would have to double the staff size of the number of staff members in the Office of National Exams and Supervisions if they were going to keep the threshold at 10 billion. So if you're going to do that, you either need to add money to the budget or you need to take staff away from the regions. And when you take staff away from the regions, you take the best and the brightest, because those are the ones that theoretically should be promoted to roll into the Office of National Exam and Supervision. So they avoided all of that by proposing changing the threshold. They're definitely signaling where it's going to go, because this will be the second or third year in a row where those credit unions have remained in the supervision of the regional offices. So what happens with the large credit union program? So Where Todd seems to be wanting to take this is you'd have the super large credit unions, those over 15. And he's saying that NCUA should have some sort of large credit union program, kind of getting them ready to go to the Office of National Exam and Supervision. I think in theory, that makes a lot of sense. The devil's in the details. The good news is Todd said in the longer term. So I can tell you, when I was at NCUA, there must have been 5 or 6 studies during my 33 years at NCUA where we considered doing large credit union programs. And actually, regional offices, regional directors, when they had a little bit more autonomy, would do their own regional large credit union programs. All-star teams of exams, for example, where they would have what they considered their best and their brightest across the region go into their biggest credit unions. Because again, of course, the bigger credit unions with the concentration of assets, a bigger concentration of risk to the insurance fund. So again, the devil's in the details. I think this is a long-term arc. I believe Todd will probably bring this back up again at the budget briefing at the end of the year. But how they structure this, how they manage it will be very interesting to watch. I believe whenever there is action on a large credit union program within the regions, that they will first focus on the $10 to $15 billion asset threshold for it being applicable to credit unions within the regions. However, the trickle down is what credit unions in totality need to worry about, because what happens is you get these ideas of best practices, they get in place in larger credit unions, and then you see that seep into the mindsets of the examiners. And then you see examiners requiring it as safety and soundness. You see guidance come out. So in the long term, this is something to watch very closely, because it could lead to regulatory burden creeping first to the 10 to 15 billion, then to the 9 billion, then to the 8 billion, and so on and so forth. So this is something to watch for in the budget in 2022. And I'm sure I'll be talking about that more down the road. But in totality, I think changing the threshold to $15 billion is a good idea. I think the concept of talking about a large credit union program makes sense, but NCUA needs to be mindful of the fact that this increased regulatory burden of smaller credit unions might not be necessary in many instances, and be very careful about wherever this new threshold is for the presumed large credit union program within the regions. All right, that's it. Thank you for listening to this quick take with Flying Colors. I'm flying solo on this episode, and I appreciate your time, and I hope to have you here listening again soon. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of With Flying Colors. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app to hear future episodes where subject matter experts of all varieties will provide tips on how to achieve success with NCUA. If you would like to learn more about how we assist credit unions, check out our services at marktreichel.com.